I'm a big supporter of early learning, and I believe those investments pay off in the long run for our children and for our communities, and specifically in the working world. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was the line item. In the governor's proposed budget, he's asking for a total of $314.5 million for early intervention, but is also requesting an additional $14 million for the current fiscal year. So I guess the question I have with that is, how did the department determine the need for the $15 million for the 2019-20 year? And will that be adequate given the fact that we've had to come back and ask for an additional $14 million for the current year that we're in?
Great question. And I'll be the first to admit that when I saw the increase for early intervention, I took a deep breath, because that's always one of the areas that I get an earful about year after year. So first, I think it's important to share that how we distribute early intervention dollars is through a rate-based service methodology that is currently now in the process of being developed with all of our service providers in MAWA. So the $14 million for the current fiscal year is to meet many of the current liabilities that have been reported, many times through the General Assembly, and the prediction for the additional $15 million is based on what we believe is going to be aligned to that rate-based methodology. So there might be, there could be a need to right-size it later on, which we'll definitely submit and work with our budget office to reconcile. But we currently believe that increase is based on what we're pre-identifying.
So you think it's going to be adequate to get us through this next?
We're trying to get this close to, yes, we're working towards adequacy.
My area is very fortunate to be with the CSIU, who keeps us well informed and has us do visits out to their sites just to make sure we completely understand what happens on the ground and how the dollars are allocated. And I am fortunate enough to have two very dear friends who work in early intervention for the last about 30 years. Mm-hmm. So I guess one of the questions I have is, I know the intermediate units have seen and experienced growing numbers of children needing to be served, but also requiring multiple and more complicated services. So do you believe that is what's accounting for the large increase needed for the program?
I think it's twofold. The first, absolutely, the greater need or the more targeted need for students is associated, but I also believe secondly, it's the reason we have to move towards a more rate-based model. We identified and the old service model provided the same rate for all students. And so there are some students that may have, less service less needs, and then there are other students who have greater needs. So by going to a service model, we'll be able to adjust those dollars accordingly. So if nothing else, it will allow us to right-size through intermediate unit by provider who has the greatest need and where that funding would come from.
And then it's my understanding that it's the Department of Education is ultimately responsible for providing the services, but we contract through the IU units. Is that correct? So
early intervention is a partnership with through us, through PDE, and support through DHS.
Okay. So is there anything that the department is doing to help the IUs kind of work through the funding challenges that they've been experiencing?
Mm-hmm. So they're one of the providers that sit on the committee that is creating that rate-based model. So so the intermediate units and any other providers that exist across the state, across the Commonwealth, are part of that group working on the methodology.
Okay, and then my last question is, I know that we've talked about this and you've talked about the way we reimburse for services. I think in the past you've shared, or other people have shared, the potential for getting a new formula for early intervention funding. Where are we with that? Are we any closer than we were in prior years? And how do you see us rolling that out?
So we're hoping this year. So by first in developing the methodology, we'll be able to better inform, they'll be able to better inform us, and then we'll be able to better inform the administration and the General Assembly around what the need is moving forward.
I'm sorry, and did you say you think that this coming fiscal year we'll be able to do the
We'll
formula?
have that methodology, hopefully this fiscal year, which is what we're working on, and then we'll see how that would drive the bigger programmatic formula.
It's encouraging to see that. Thank you for your time today, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the questions.